Ethan Hayes, the man I'd been dating, the man whose confidence had always seemed as vast as his former fortune, told me he was bankrupt. And then, almost as an afterthought, he told me we were over. I just stared at him across the small table in the bustling café, the clatter of cups and low hum of conversation fading into a dull roar in my ears. No, I managed, the word feeling small but surprisingly firm on my tongue. He raised a skeptical eyebrow, the ghost of his usual charming smile playing on his lips despite the gravity of his announcement. No, he echoed. Chloe, listen. The company's gone under. Oh, well, let's just say a lot is putting it mildly. I can't drag you down into this mess with me. I'm not going anywhere, I insisted, my knuckles white as I gripped my lukewarm coffee cup. We'd only been on 7 dates, a whirlwind courtship that felt both dizzyingly fast and incredibly right. He was older, sophisticated, handsome in that rugged, experienced way, worlds away from anyone I'd ever known. Now he was broke. He leaned forward slightly, his dark eyes intense. Are you serious about that? When I could only manage a numb nod, a challenging glint appeared in his gaze. Serious enough to make this permanent? Right now. My breath caught in my throat. What do you mean? I mean, he said, his voice dropping to a low, steady murmur that sent shivers down my spine. Do you dare walk into the city registry office with me today? And just like that, swept up in a bewildering vortex of defiance, unexpected loyalty, and perhaps a significant dose of sheer insanity, I agreed. An hour later, emerging from the stark, impersonal municipal building, my hand trembled as I clutched the small, official-looking booklet that declared us husband and wife. Married? Just like that? To Ethan Hayes, a man freshly declared bankrupt, a man I'd known for precisely 7 dates, a man significantly older than my 26 years. My head was spinning, reality feeling thin and surreal. Second thoughts already? Ethan's voice sliced through my daze. He was watching me, his expression unreadable, though that familiar flicker of wry amusement danced in his eyes. Before I could even attempt to untangle my thoughts enough to answer his rather pointed question, my phone erupted with a jarring vibration from inside my purse. My mother. I braced myself, instinctively lowering my voice as I answered. Chloe, honey. Her voice boomed through the phone, easily loud enough for Ethan, standing right beside me, to hear every syllable. Your father mentioned something. Ethan's family company? Is it true? Bankrupt? Drowning in debt? Oh, please tell me you haven't, gotten too involved with him. I felt my cheeks flush a betraying crimson and risked a sideways glance at my brand new husband. No, Mom, I mumbled, keeping my voice as low as possible. Oh, thank goodness. Listen to me, Chloe. You need to break it off. Right now. Do you understand me? I managed weakly, a sudden chilling wave of fear washing over me at the mere thought of ever bringing Ethan home to meet her. And another thing, she plowed on, completely oblivious to my hesitation. If he dares to ask you for money, any money, you tell him absolutely not. Not 1 single cent. Promise me. Got it, Mom. I promise. I ended the call, my heart pounding a nervous rhythm against my ribs, a heavy weight of guilt settling in my stomach. When I finally forced myself to look up, I met Ethan's gaze, which was brimming with undisguised, infuriating mirth. He'd definitely heard everything. Well, he said, his tone light. Perhaps we should pop back inside? Get an annulment? Don't worry, this time the fee's on me. Do you even have any money left in your accounts? I asked tentatively, the practicality starting to crash down. Sure, Ethan replied with infuriating calm. How much? Oh, around 5 million, give or take, he mused, rubbing his chin thoughtfully as if trying to recall a trivial detail. That much? A spark of excitement flared within me. See, rich people were different. Even bankrupt, he still had millions stashed away. He gave me a look that clearly communicated he thought I was an idiot. Chloe, they're frozen. By the banks. Can't touch a penny. He pulled out his wallet, flipping it open to reveal a depressing collection of plastic cards and a single crisp $10 bill. Frankly, he said, snapping the wallet shut, what I have on hand is probably just enough to cover the filing fee for a divorce. Oh. He was in that bad a shape and he was offering to pay? If I let him, what kind of person would that make me? Can they be unfrozen? I asked, though hope felt like a distant, flickering candle. His expression softened. shifting into something that looked suspiciously like pity. Not likely anytime soon. I still owe the banks about $1 billion. By $1 billion? I nearly bit my tongue, convinced I must have misheard. The number was incomprehensible. He didn't answer directly, instead shifting his tone slightly. And that's just the banks. Then there are the private lenders, the suppliers, all told, adding everything up, the total debt is probably closer to $3 billion. My mind reeled. $3 billion. I instinctively glanced at my own banking app, my modest savings account suddenly seeming laughably insignificant. Do I have to help pay it back? The thought hit me with the force of a physical blow. This whole impulsive marriage thing was starting to feel incredibly reckless. Maybe I should cut him loose now? Let him find some wealthy heiress to bail him out? No, he said, reaching out to gently ruffle my hair, a gesture that was surprisingly disarming. A small smile touched his lips. You don't need to worry about that. Just providing a roof over my head is more than enough for now. Oh, okay. As we passed a subway station entrance, I ducked inside on impulse. I bought a transit card, loaded it with $20, a significant dent in my own emergency cash, and presented it to him. He didn't take it, just looked at the card, then at me, an eyebrow slightly raised. My face flushed. We'll need to take the bus back to my place, I explained quickly. There's a direct route from here. It's only 80 cents. With the card, the subway is $3, no discount. This way we save $2.20. It's not much, I know, but every little bit helps, right? Thoughtful, he murmured, finally taking the card and slipping it into his pocket with that same unnerving calm. But unnecessary. I've arranged for a car. A friend? I asked, remembering the various groups of people he'd introduced me to on our dates. They'd always struck me as fair-weather friends, the kind you drink and play cards with, not the type to stick around when the chips were down. Maybe I'd misjudged them. Perhaps some were genuinely loyal. It seemed my worldview was a bit narrow. A creditor, he replied with a completely unconcerned smile. Oh, right. Definitely narrow-minded of me. The car arrived remarkably quickly, a sleek dark sedan. The driver was a man in his 30s, wearing glasses, who greeted Ethan with surprising deference. Throughout the drive towards my neighborhood, the man never once mentioned money or repayment. As we neared my apartment building, Ethan suddenly instructed the driver to pull over. Got a card on you? Ethan asked the man. The driver, Simon, turned around, his expression instantly wary, almost fearful. Boss, you still haven't paid back the $20 million you borrowed last time. Put it on my tab. I'll settle up next time, Ethan said dismissively, holding out his hand expectantly. Simon, looking deeply unhappy, reluctantly opened his wallet, extracted a credit card and handed it over. Try not to max it out immediately, he muttered under his breath. Ethan ignored him, grabbing my arm. Come on, let's go. A knot of anxiety tightened in my stomach. Why was he borrowing more money? Ethan, I whispered urgently, pulling him back slightly. My salary is about $9,500 a month. If you're careful, really careful, we can manage. We have enough to live on. He was already $3 billion in debt. How could he possibly have the nerve to borrow more? And worse, this was debt acquired after we got married. Didn't that make it our debt? Ethan paused, looking genuinely taken aback for a second. Then that familiar hand landed softly on my head again. Relax, Chloe. I just need to buy you a wedding ring. We seem to have overlooked that detail. After that, he promised, his eyes softening, I'll listen to everything you say. His reminder hit me. In the whirlwind of the registry office, a ring hadn't even crossed my mind. I can pay for the ring, I insisted quickly. Give the card back to him. Ethan didn't reply, seeming to actually consider it. From the driver's seat, Simon chimed in, surprisingly supportive. Let him buy it, miss. Seriously, he already owes $3 billion. What's another 100,000 here or there? His logic was bizarrely irrefutable. I didn't know how to argue. Emboldened by his creditor's permission, Ethan seemed to gain a new sense of entitlement, pulling me decisively towards the glittering entrance of a nearby high-end shopping mall's jewelry section. When we emerged a short time later, Ethan wore a distinct scowl. He clearly thought the diamond ring I'd insisted on, a perfectly respectable one that still cost an eye-watering $88,000, was far too cheap. I glanced down at the sparkling stone on my left ring finger. His definition of cheap was clearly warped by years of unimaginable wealth. Still, after some firm insistence on my part, he slid the matching simpler band onto his own finger. There, I thought with a surge of possessive satisfaction. Let all those other potential vultures know this particular prize is officially taken. Back at my small, rented apartment, Ethan immediately fielded several calls, retreating to the tiny balcony. He stood ramrod straight, his back to me, but I could faintly overhear snippets about properties, cars, assets being assessed for auction to pay off debts. Strangely, I wasn't worried. A man capable of racking up that much debt surely had the capability to earn it back. Besides, he was an Ivy League graduate, the golden boy my parents had compared me unfavorably to throughout my childhood. By the time he finished his calls, I had washed the vegetables I'd found in the fridge, remnants from my mother's last visit, and was about to start cooking. He swiftly intercepted me, taking the knife from my hand. I'm living in your place, eating your food. The least I can do is handle the chores. Okay, I agreed readily, stepping aside without protest. Having been single for all of my 26 years, my culinary skills were, let's just say, functional at best. Takeout was my usual sustenance. I'd already experienced Ethan's cooking prowess. On our third date, he'd driven me in a car worth more than my parents' house to his sprawling, minimalist bachelor pad and prepared an incredible meal. That night, he gently tried to persuade me to stay over, but I'd panicked and refused. By our sixth date, the gap between our worlds felt overwhelmingly vast. I'd been seriously contemplating whether I should end things, feeling completely out of my depth. Then boom, he went bankrupt. Breaking up with him now felt horribly callous. And then, his impulsive dare had somehow led us straight to the registry office. The whole situation still felt like a bizarre, unbelievable dream. Penny for your thoughts? Ethan nudged me gently with his hip, breaking into my reverie. Nothing, I mumbled, quickly turning away to avoid his searching gaze. He expertly scooped up a piece of stir-fried bok choy. He just plated and held it towards my mouth. Taste this. Too salty. I opened my mouth automatically, feeling a blush creep up my neck. It was both intimate and nerve-wracking. No, it's fine. Really? His eyes narrowed slightly, focusing on my lips with unnerving intensity. Let me see. Okay, I agreed hesitantly. Before the word was fully out, he swiftly cupped my chin with one hand, leaned down and his lips met mine. The kiss deepened, warm and insistent. Then just as suddenly he pulled back slightly, wrapping his arms around me, holding me close. His warm breath ghosted against my ear. He murmured, his voice husky. Maybe a little salty after all. My face instantly burst into flames. I pushed against his chest instinctively, but he simply tightened his grip, effortlessly lifting me and setting me down on the edge of the small dining table nearby. Dinner can wait, don't you think? He asked, his eyes burning into mine with an intensity that made my toes curl. I knew this look. I knew Ethan's legendary skill at seduction all too well. Apart from our very first rather formal date, every subsequent encounter had involved this relentless, captivating charm offensive. My earlier hesitation about our relationship stemmed partly from the feeling that we were from different planets, but a significant part was simply my inability to withstand this kind of focused attention. I was constantly afraid that one careless moment would lead to total surrender. My best friend Jess always said you had to keep men guessing, keep them on their toes. But with Ethan and me, it was never clear who was playing whom. Now his thumb was tracing the outline of my lips, a feather-light touch that sent sparks through my system. Seeing my silence, he leaned closer, deliberately lowering his voice to a seductive whisper. We have the certificate now, Chloe. Am I still off limits? How was I supposed to answer that? It felt like a trap no matter what I said. I opted for deflection. Patting my stomach pointedly, I said, I'm starving. Let's eat first, okay? He didn't move, his body still pressed close against mine. Seriously, Ethan. I'm really hungry, I insisted, giving his leg a tentative nudge with my foot. He slowly straightened up, a faint smile playing on his lips as he smoothed down the collar of my shirt. All right, one more dish. Stir-fried shredded potatoes coming right up. As soon as Ethan walked back towards the stove, I felt like I could breathe properly again, watching his tall figure move confidently around my tiny kitchen. A wave of unexpected contentment washed over me, a quiet happiness that was hard to put into words. Just then my phone rang again. Glancing at the caller ID, I quickly grabbed it and retreated to the bedroom, closing the door behind me. Chloe, did you see the news? Ethan Hayes went bankrupt. Jess's excited voice crackled through the phone, practically vibrating with barely contained glee. He told me, I whispered, pressing the phone closer to my ear. Well, what are you waiting for? Go get him. Now's your chance. Jess sounded even more thrilled about his bankruptcy than I was bewildered. I stalled, trying to figure out how to break the real news to her. Come on. This is Ethan Hayes, the guy you've been secretly obsessed with since forever. So what if he's bankrupt? A starved camel is still bigger than a horse, right? He must have hidden assets stashed away somewhere. Jess's analysis was delivered with breathless conviction. I didn't have the heart to tell her that my supposed catch was not only broke but also $3 billion in debt. Listen to me, Chloe, she urged. He's down on his luck, probably feeling vulnerable. This is the perfect time to make your move. Secure the relationship. Who knows, maybe he'll make a huge comeback someday. He doesn't actually seem that upset. I finally managed to interject. That was the strangest part. I didn't know how other people handled bankruptcy, but Ethan was unnervingly calm. Facing a $3 billion debt seemed to affect him about as much as owing $30. Not a ripple of panic disturbed his composure. Exactly. That proves it. Jess declared triumphantly. He definitely has a secret stash. This whole bankruptcy thing is probably just a test to see if you're only after his money. You know how rich guys are, always paranoid, always suspecting people's motives. Her theories were spiraling rapidly into the realm of cheesy soap opera plots. I quickly cut her off before she launched into a full-blown dramatic monologue. Look, Jess, Ethan's here right now. I'll talk to you later, okay? Jess, ever the supportive friend, replied instantly with a text message containing an emoji vigorously tackling someone to the ground. I glanced at the closed bedroom door, a wry smile touching my lips. Who tackles whom remains to be seen, I thought. After dinner, I fled to the relative safety of the bedroom. The way Ethan had looked at me throughout the meal, that intense, unwavering heat in his gaze, had kept me on edge. His constant little attentions, placing food on my plate, murmuring encouragements to eat more, occasionally brushing away a non-existent crumb from the corner of my mouth with his thumb. It was all part of his devastatingly effective charm offensive. He really wouldn't rest until he'd completely flustered me. I picked up a book and tried to read, settling onto the small chair on the bedroom balcony. The faint sounds of Ethan cleaning up in the kitchen drifted in, somehow making the small space feel warmer, stuffier. I decided to open the window for some fresh air. Just as I slid it open, the bedroom door clicked open behind me, and Ethan walked in. I froze, book forgotten in my lap. Go take a shower, he said calmly, already acting as if this tiny apartment was entirely his own domain. You go first, I stammered, swallowing hard. He gave me a brief, unreadable glance before heading into the en-suite bathroom. My bedroom layout included a bathroom with a frosted glass door. His silhouette was visible, a tall, shadowy form moving behind the translucent barrier. I wanted to look away, to respect his privacy, but curiosity warred with propriety. My eyes kept drifting back. It seemed tonight was unavoidable. Besides, we were legally married now. He was technically family. The fortress walls I'd instinctively kept up probably didn't need guarding anymore, right? Ethan showered quickly. He emerged moments later with just a towel wrapped low around his hips, droplets of water glistening on his shoulders and chest. My heart hammered against my ribs, and I felt my face flush again. Aren't you going to put on clothes? Confiscated by the courts, he replied, his expression perfectly deadpan. Courts confiscate clothes now? Was he really trying to pass that off, treating me like some naive fool? Why didn't you say something before you went in? I demanded, finding my voice. Didn't we agree? After buying the ring, the wife's word is law. He countered, still utterly composed. His logic, however absurd, left me speechless. I turned away pointedly, refusing to look at him. Or, he continued, moving closer until he was standing right behind me, gently resting his hands on my shoulders, I could have someone deliver some things? Weren't they all confiscated? I retorted, unable to keep the sarcasm out of my voice. There are always the creditors, he murmured, his damp hair brushing against the sensitive skin of my neck, sending a jolt through me. I can ask them to bring over something new. Just leave your poor creditors alone, I exclaimed, feeling a surge of pity for these mysterious benefactors. Did all debtors behave this shamelessly these days? Need to keep them busy, he whispered, his breath warm against my ear. Otherwise, they might think I've skipped town. Before I could react, he spun me around, and in a dizzying motion, I found myself gently deposited onto the bed. He leaned over me, his face inches from mine, his gaze intense. His breath mingled with mine, yet his voice when he spoke held a note of almost courtly politeness. Are you sure you don't need to shower first? Yes. I practically shouted, pushing him slightly. I mean, yes, I need to wash up. After spending a good half hour under the hot spray, trying to collect my scattered thoughts, I emerged from the bathroom only to be immediately pulled into Ethan's arms and pressed onto the bed for a deep, searching kiss. The thought surfaced, clear and undeniable. This man was now my legal husband, and he owed a fortune. There was a very real possibility that, going forward, I might be the one supporting him. Suddenly, my carefully constructed defenses didn't just crumble. They evaporated completely. With a newfound sense of resolution, I wrapped my arms around his neck and pulled him closer. Sometime in the dead of night, I drifted into a hazy sleep. Through the fog, I vaguely sensed Ethan slipping out of bed, pulling on pants. I thought I heard the low murmur of his voice dawned on Shir Duanduangs intermittently, drifting from the balcony. But my eyelids felt impossibly heavy, the pull of sleep too strong to resist. I succumbed completely. When I woke, sunlight streamed through the window, and Ethan was lying peacefully beside me. Asleep, he looked younger, almost vulnerable. His long lashes cast faint shadows on his cheeks, reminding me fleetingly of the intense, unattainable boy he'd seemed like in my younger years. My office wasn't far, but the strict 8 a.m. clock-in time meant a 7 a.m. departure. Quietly, I slipped out of bed. I took $1,000 from my wallet, a hefty sum for me, and tucked it gently under his pillow. Then, gathering the clothes he'd worn yesterday, I put them in the washing machine, selecting the wash and dry cycle. Finally, I sent him a quick message on WeChat, letting him know about the money in the laundry. Only then did I feel composed enough to leave for work. After clocking in, I headed to the company cafeteria. The air buzzed with gossip, almost exclusively centered on the spectacular collapse of the Hayes Corporation. My colleague Rachel spotted me and hurried over, her expression concerned. "Chloe," she whispered conspiratorially, leaning close. "Don't feel obligated, okay? If you need to break up, just do it. Don't feel bad about it." She'd seen Ethan pick me up in one of his flashy cars before, so she knew we were secretly dating. Smiling faintly, I deliberately raised my left hand, flashing the $88,000 diamond ring. Rachel's eyes widened, then narrowed suspiciously. "Wow, Chloe, where did you get that? It looks so real. Send me the link, okay? I could use a fun fake diamond to wear around." Her excited assumption immediately brought back the image of Ethan's scowling face when I'd insisted on buying this cheap ring yesterday. "Looks like something from a street stall," his expression had practically screamed. "It's my wedding ring," I stated quietly, clearing my throat. "Ethan and I got married yesterday." Rachel froze, staring at me, speechless for a long moment. When she finally seemed convinced I was serious, she let out a long, dramatic sigh. "Oh, Chloe, it must be true then. The Hayes family must really be broke if they're buying fake wedding rings." "Oh, seriously? Did it really look that cheap?" After a quick breakfast, a message pinged on my phone. It was from Ethan. "Wife, I'll pick you up after work tonight." My first instinct was to tell him not to come. I dreaded the inevitable stares and whispers from colleagues. But then again, I couldn't keep my husband hidden away forever. "Okay." I typed back simply. The workday was a blur of deadlines and meetings. Finally, quitting time arrived. As I exited the main building, I saw Ethan leaning casually against the wall near the entrance, hands tucked into his pockets. He was still wearing the same clothes from yesterday, now freshly laundered thanks to me. I walked over, linked my arm through his, and announced with a sudden surge of bravado, "Come on, let's get you some new clothes." "Thank you, wife," he replied, his eyes crinkling at the corners. There was a large wholesale clothing market near my office, known for its vast selection and rock-bottom prices. I steered him towards a men's clothing stall and efficiently picked out 2 complete outfits, from shirts and trousers down to underwear and socks. When I went to pay, Ethan placed his hand firmly over mine. "I've got it. Where would you get money from?" I protested. He was bankrupt. This was hardly the time to argue over a few $100s for basic necessities. From my hard-earned pay, courtesy of my wife, he said, his gaze turning warm and distinctly suggestive. He pulled out his wallet and extracted 3 crisp $100 bills. The money I'd left under his pillow that morning. My intention had been purely practical. His cards were frozen. He'd need cash for groceries or small expenses. How had he twisted it into payment for services rendered? And what hard work was he even referring to? Okay, maybe he had worked hard last night. So, I increased his allowance from $1,000 to $2,000. He took the extra cash, counted it deliberately, tucked it into his wallet, and gave me a slow, appreciative smile that hinted at things best left unsaid in public. My wife is so generous. My face flamed. That's grocery money, I insisted hotly. He didn't argue, just watched me, his dark eyes seeming to hold tiny sparkling stars. My heart did that familiar traitorous flip-flop. How could this old man, relatively speaking, still possess such an electric charm? Taking a deep breath to steady my pulse, I patted my chest and hurried back towards the office entrance. Ethan settled remarkably well into his new role. With no income stream post-bankruptcy, he became a surprisingly dedicated house husband. He cooked, he cleaned, and true to his word, he picked me up from work every evening. Then one afternoon just after lunch, Rachel rushed over to my desk breathless. "Chloe, look, downstairs. Isn't that your husband?" I walked over to the window and peered down. Good grief, it was definitely him. And he was wearing one of the $100 outfits I'd bought him at the market. "Wait," Rachel squinted. "Who's that woman with him?" That's exactly what I wanted to know. "Whoa, is that a Porsche she's driving? She must be loaded," Rachel exclaimed, practically bouncing with excitement. I felt a surge of something hot and unpleasant twist in my gut, but I forced a casual smile. "Oh, probably just an old business associate," I said, trying to sound nonchalant while my mind raced. Marrying a man $3 billion in debt was one thing. But having that same man use the pocket money I gave him to rendezvous with rich women in Porsches? Was my allowance too small for his tastes? Just before quitting time, another message arrived from Ethan. He had some business to attend to and wouldn't be able to pick me up tonight. Of course, now that he had a rich benefactress, his poor wife at home was suddenly inconvenient. Ugh, men. I fumed silently. Typical. Walking into my apartment later that evening, I was surprised to find Ethan standing at the stove, wearing an apron, calmly stir-frying vegetables. Wasn't he supposed to be entertaining the Porsche woman? He certainly worked fast. "Hi, wife. Go wash your hands, dinner's almost ready," he greeted me cheerfully. "Right," I said, dropping my bag onto the entryway cabinet and pulling out a dining chair with deliberate slowness. I sat down, crossing my arms. Time for an interrogation. Let's talk. Who was she? His past romantic history was none of my business. But we were married now. I was the officially certified Mrs. Hayes. If he dared to cheat, I'd make sure he understood the meaning of leaving with only the clothes on his back. Assuming the courts hadn't already taken those too. Ethan paused mid-stir, then turned, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Jealous? Don't try to charm your way out of this," I warned, keeping my expression stern. "Full disclosure is encouraged. Resistance is futile." "She's a creditor," Ethan said, turning off the stove burner. He walked over, pulled out the chair opposite me and sat down, his expression earnest. "She wants to partner on a new business venture. I went with her today to meet a potential investor." He reached across the small table and took my hand. "The meeting ran late. That's why I couldn't pick you up." I remained silent, studying his face. He squeezed my hand gently. "If it makes you uncomfortable, I promise once I've repaid her loan, I'll cut ties completely." My resolve wavered slightly. "How much do you owe her?" I asked. Maybe I could scrape together enough from my savings to pay this one off, eliminate the temptation. I'd been frugal over the years. I had a small nest egg. A little over 200 million. Oh, my savings suddenly seemed pitifully inadequate. "Well then, take your time paying her back," I conceded, the fight draining out of me. "Don't be mad, Chloe. Please." He stood up, came around behind me, and wrapped his arms loosely around my neck, resting his chin on top of my head. "She really is just a creditor. If you don't believe me, I can arrange for you two to meet. You can ask her yourself." Okay, I mumbled. Deep down, I hadn't truly suspected him of infidelity. It was more the principle of the thing. My husband riding around in another woman's luxury car without telling me. That combined with his history of questionable friends, the flashy lifestyle he used to lead, and his incorrigible habit of flirting relentlessly, made it easy to jump to conclusions about him being an irresponsible playboy. "You're the best, wife," Ethan murmured, planting a soft kiss on my forehead before heading back to the kitchen to serve dinner. After dinner, while Ethan took a shower, I sat curled up on the living room sofa, composing a voice message for Jess. Jess had a cousin who worked in finance, and I knew Ethan had spent some time in investment banking before taking over the family business. Maybe Jess's cousin could help him find a job. Investment banking paid well, right? Surely a six-figure salary wasn't out of the question. Relying on the hard-earned pay I sporadically gave him wasn't a sustainable long-term plan for tackling billions in debt. Jess's reply came almost immediately, her voice practically shrieking through the phone. "Chloe Song, have you lost your mind? Ethan Hayes could probably kill you with a loose change falling out of his pockets, and you want him to get a job earning a monthly salary." She sounded even more incredulous than when I'd confessed to marrying him. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. It was time to tell her the whole truth. "Jess, he's currently over $3 billion in debt. Today, he was literally chauffeured around by a female creditor. The only thing leaking from his pockets right now is air." How much?" Jess sounded like she was choking. "Over $3 billion, I repeated, emphasizing the billion. "You're insane. He's a deadbeat. You married a deadbeat, Chloe. You won't even be able to take the high-speed train together." "He said he'll pay it back." I defended him, feeling a prickle of annoyance. I didn't like anyone calling Ethan a deadbeat, not even Jess. "With what?" Jess yelled. "My sweet naive girl, that's $3 billion, not 300,000. He has properties, cars. They can be sold to cover some of it. It won't be as much after liquidation," I argued, reciting the justifications I'd told myself. The penthouse apartment he'd taken me to once was easily worth $100 million alone. He owned several villas in the exclusive Hillcrest area. Plus, who knew what other hidden assets he had? He owned over a dozen luxury cars. He'd driven a different one every time he picked me up for our dates. Surely, even after bankruptcy, liquidating assets like that would significantly reduce the debt. Right? "You really are naive, aren't you?" Jess sighed heavily. "Businessmen like him? The moment cash flow tightens, the first thing they do is mortgage their properties and cars. Those houses and vehicles you're dreaming about probably belonged to the bank long before the company officially went under." Really? A cold dread started to seep into my bones. "You need to find out, Chloe. Ask him point blank if he has any hidden funds, a secret stash somewhere. If he doesn't, you need to divorce him. Immediately." Jess continued talking, offering more advice and dire warnings, but my mind was already miles away. I barely registered the rest of the conversation or when the call ended. Could it be true? Was Ethan really saddled with an unpayable lifelong debt? Seemed impossible. This was Ethan Hayes, the brilliant, dazzling man who had always seemed capable of anything. For the next few days, I drifted through work and home life in a fog of anxiety. The staggering weight of the potential debt spurred me into a new phase of extreme frugality. I started meticulously tracking every penny spent, clipping coupons, and brown bagging my lunches. Ironically, apart from the looming financial catastrophe, the month since our impulsive wedding had felt strangely like an extended honeymoon. Living together, even in my cramped apartment, had been unexpectedly nice. "Honey," I began tentatively one Saturday afternoon, watching Ethan efficiently mopping the small living room floor while I lounged on the sofa. "Have you thought about maybe looking for a job?" He glanced back at me, his expression neutral. "Once the debts are cleared, I'll find work." "But how can you clear the debts without working?" I protested, exasperated. Was he planning to pay back billions with the hard-earned pay I gave him every few days? At this rate, our great-great-great-grandchildren will still be paying it off. He paused his mopping and walked over, gently flicking my nose. "Are we channeling the foolish old man moving mountains now, Chloe? Great-great-great-grandchildren. I'm just worried." I caught his hand, looking earnestly into his eyes. "Ethan, do you realize that if you default on debts this large, you could be barred from even taking high-speed trains?" "Then we'll fly," he replied easily. a fond smile playing on his lips. They might ban you from flying too. Couldn't he take this seriously for 1 second? Private jet it is, then. Do you have a private jet? I exclaimed, pushing his hand away in frustration. He recaptured my hand, raising it to his lips for a soft kiss. No, he admitted cheerfully. But I'm sure one of my creditors does. Oh. How many good creditors did this man have? They never seemed to demand repayment, and they apparently catered to his every whim. This conversation was going nowhere. I deliberately put on a stern face. Get me a glass of water, please. Smiling, he obediently headed towards the kitchen. Just as I was about to reach for the remote, a sharp knock echoed through the apartment. Chloe? It's Mom. If you're home, open the door. My mother's unmistakable voice boomed through the thin wood. My blood ran cold. Oh God. I still hadn't told my parents we were married. If Mom found out, especially now knowing about the bankruptcy, she would hit the roof. The fallout would be catastrophic. Should I hide? Ethan asked, reappearing from the kitchen, glass in hand, his voice suddenly quiet and considerate. My eyes darted frantically around my tiny 50-square-meter apartment. Where could a 6'1" man possibly hide? The wardrobe. I whispered desperately. He nodded, proving himself to be a remarkably accommodating and potentially endangered husband. I quickly shoved him towards the bedroom. Outside, I heard the jangle of keys, Mom assuming I wasn't home and using her spare. I barely managed to click the bedroom door shut before Mom burst into the living room. Why didn't you open the door if you were home? She demanded, frowning at me. I forced a yawn. Sorry, Mom. I was asleep. Sleeping? In the middle of the afternoon. She eyed me suspiciously, then marched over to the refrigerator, pulling it open to stuff inside the groceries she'd brought. Oh, Mom, the fridge is full. I just went shopping yesterday. You should take those back, I said quickly. Ethan had indeed done a grocery run the day before. Mom peered into the packed fridge, then turned, her eyes narrowing. This fridge is suspiciously full, Chloe. And I noticed a pair of men's sneakers by the door when I came in. Are you hiding someone in here? Mom, what are you talking about? I squeaked, my heart pounding. I quickly turned on the TV, hoping for a distraction. Don't try to change the subject, she said sharply, snatching the remote and switching the TV off. The shoes, the groceries. Don't think I don't know what's going on. Her gaze was sharp, penetrating. I couldn't meet her eyes. Is it Ethan Hayes? She demanded, her voice tight with disapproval. I remained silent. Mom had vehemently opposed my dating Ethan from the start. She insisted a man like him, successful, wealthy, sophisticated, was out of my league, that I couldn't possibly handle him. She'd even tried setting me up with the son of one of her regular customers, a quiet, reliable high school teacher. I'd reluctantly agreed to meet him just to appease her endless nagging, only to run into Ethan, who happened to be having a business meeting at the same restaurant. He'd cornered me near the restrooms and delivered a surprisingly intense lecture on everything, from relationship values and marriage principles to life philosophy and basic moral integrity. It was the first time I'd suspected his interest in me might be more than casual flirtation. Now, knowing he was bankrupt and $3 billion in debt, Mom's reaction would be 10 times worse. She'd grown up poor. The fear of financial ruin ran deep. Seeing my silence, Mom's temper flared. Hayes, she bellowed towards the bedroom door. Get yourself out here right now. As her shout echoed in the small apartment, my phone vibrated in my pocket. A message from Ethan. Need me to come out? My fingers fumbled as I tried to type back. No. Before I could hit send, Mom snatched the phone from my hand. Without even looking at the screen, she stormed towards the bedroom. Mom, wait. I scrambled after her, trying to block her path, but years of hard physical work had made her surprisingly strong. She easily pushed me aside. She scanned the small bedroom, her eyes zeroing in on the wardrobe. With a decisive tug, she yanked the door open. There squatted Ethan, crammed uncomfortably inside, holding the glass of water in one hand and his phone in the other. It was an utterly undignified position, yet somehow, his expression remained perfectly calm, almost nonchalant. Faced with this bizarre sight, Mom seemed to lose some of her initial fury, though her face remained stern. What? She demanded icily. Are you doing hiding in my daughter's wardrobe? Ethan slowly unfolded himself, emerging from the confined space. He calmly handed me the glass of water. Drink this while it's warm. Seriously? Now was hardly the time to worry about the temperature of the water. I took the glass, my hands trembling, tears welling up in my eyes. Mom ignored, bristled. I asked you a question. What were you doing in my daughter's wardrobe? Mom, Ethan said, stepping forward and putting a steadying arm around my shoulders. He met my mother's furious gaze squarely, his voice calm but firm. Chloe and I are married now. We're husband and wife. Mom gasped, her eyes flying wide. She spun around to stare at me. Trapped, I could only nod mutely, bracing for the explosion. But the explosion didn't come. Mom just stared at me, her face a mask of shock and disbelief. Then, without another word, she turned on her heel and marched out of the apartment. Ethan and I rushed after her, but we were too late. The thunderous slam of the front door reverberated through the small space, announcing the depth of her fury far more effectively than any shout could have. The next day my father called. He asked me to bring Ethan over to their house that evening. Both families needed to meet, he said gravely, to discuss the situation. My stomach churned with anxiety. Okay, listen, I instructed Ethan frantically beforehand. When my parents ask about the debt, just tell them you owe $300,000. I chewed my lip. That didn't sound convincing for someone like him. No, wait. Make it $3 million. That sounds more plausible. Ethan nodded agreeably. Whatever the wife says. Having settled on our slightly less terrifying lie, we headed to a nearby mall to buy some obligatory gifts for my parents. As we approached the entrance, Ethan glanced up at the mall's name sign. Ah, he remarked casually. The owner of this place? He's one of my creditors. My internal alarms blared. Right, I said firmly. We are buying standard, reasonably priced nutritional supplements. You are not to hit up your creditors for fancy gifts. Okay, wife. Whatever you say, he agreed, his eyes crinkling in that way that always made me suspicious. While we waited for the elevator, he pulled out his phone and started rapidly tapping out messages. Given the sheer number of creditors he seemed to have, he spent a significant portion of each day just replying to texts and calls. The elevator arrived, and we went straight to the supermarket on the third floor. I carefully selected a few modest gift boxes of vitamins and health drinks, placing them in our cart. As we waited in the checkout line, Ethan excused himself, saying he needed to take a call outside. After paying, I stepped out of the supermarket, phone in hand, ready to call him. I spotted him a short distance away, laden with several large, expensive-looking gift bags. Standing beside him was a man in a sharp suit, Simon Stone, the creditor driver. I marched over, indignation bubbling. What? I demanded, pointing at the bags. Is all that? Some vintage moutai for my father-in-law, Ethan announced proudly, and a gold bracelet for my mother-in-law. My face flushed, partly from embarrassment at the terms father-in-law and mother-in-law, but mostly from annoyance. Where did you get the money for this? I demanded, keeping my voice low but firm. $3 billion in debt, and he still couldn't curb his extravagant spending habits? Didn't spend a thing, Ethan replied smoothly, nodding towards Simon. A gift from a good friend. I eyed Ethan skeptically, then turned my attention to Simon. Don't be afraid, I said encouragingly. Did he borrow money from you again? No, he didn't borrow anything, Simon stammered, casting a nervous glance at Ethan. These were truly voluntary gifts. My pleasure. He emphasized the word voluntary, with slightly too much force. It sounded utterly insincere. I desperately wanted Ethan to return the expensive items, but causing a scene in front of Simon felt wrong, potentially humiliating for Ethan. Taking a deep breath, I calmly gave Simon my WeChat contact information. I'll transfer the money for these to you later, I promised. Simon's face immediately broke into a wide, relieved grin. Sister-in-law, you're truly a lifesaver. Just following the example set by Ethan's remarkably charitable creditors, I retorted drily. You all seem like saints. Ethan's expression darkened considerably at my comment, but preoccupied with the escalating cost of this family meeting, I completely missed it. The entire drive to my parents' house was filled with my stern lecture on the principles of debt repayment, financial responsibility, and the unacceptable nature of exploiting one's creditors, no matter how numerous or seemingly willing they were. Ethan listened in complete silence, accepting my tirade without a word of protest. As Simon pulled up to the curb in front of the house, Ethan suddenly leaned over, caught my face between his hands and kissed me soundly, right as I was reaching for the door handle. Pinch, you jerk. I protested mentally. We're in the car. In front of your creditor. From the front seat, Simon offered helpfully. Don't worry, sister-in-law. My prescription is -8. I didn't see a thing. -8 eyesight and you're still driving? Who are you kidding? Inside the house, Mr. and Mrs. Hayes were already there, waiting with my parents. They greeted me with overwhelming warmth. Chloe dear, look at you all grown up. It's been too long, Mrs. Hayes exclaimed, pulling me into a perfumed hug, acting completely at ease, as if this were her own home. Mr. Hayes beamed at me, then clapped Ethan on the shoulder. Good eye, son. You picked a winner. I stood there, offering awkward smiles, acutely aware of my own parents' stony-faced silence. Mr. and Mrs. Hayes, however, launched into an enthusiastic monologue, showering me with compliments. Beautiful, intelligent, kind, gentle, thoughtful, generous. If their vocabulary hadn't eventually run out, I suspected they might have nominated me for sainthood. My mother, whose eye-rolling was reaching epic proportions, finally cut them off with a sharp cough. We didn't invite you here today to listen to a recital of our daughter-in-law's many virtues. Mrs. Hayes paused, momentarily taken aback, then recovered smoothly. Of course, dear. I understand. Although our family is experiencing some temporary difficulties, we still understand the importance of proper etiquette. Good, my mother snapped, nudging my father with her elbow. My father cleared his throat, glanced uneasily at me. I offered him my most pathetic, pleading look, then quickly looked away. Arthur, he began, addressing Mr. Hayes. We go way back. And Ethan, I've watched you grow up. You're a fine young man, truly outstanding. But our Chloe, she's our precious girl. We've cherished her. The Song family might not have the Hayes fortune, but we can't just marry her off without proper consideration. Mr. Hayes nodded gravely. Rest assured, David, we would never allow Chloe to be treated unfairly. My mother jumped in before anyone else could speak. We require a bride price of $3 million. That's not unreasonable, is it? Not at all. Mrs. Hayes beamed. For a wonderful girl like Chloe, $3 million is nothing. She's worth $30 million. Horrified, I frantically jabbed Ethan in the ribs. Stop your mother. I tried to signal silently. She's bluffing. Where would they get $3 million? The accounts are frozen. Mom knows they're broke. As predicted, my mother scoffed. And where would you get $3 million? I heard the bank seized everything, even your houses. Scarcely had the words left her mouth when a loud, mechanical female voice suddenly announced from her phone, lying on the coffee table. Alipay transfer received. 3 million yuan. My mother froze. I froze. My father and Mr. Hayes looked stunned. Mrs. Hayes, however, simply picked up her phone from the table, smiling sweetly. Well, now that the bride price is settled, shall we discuss the wedding arrangements? I whipped my head around to glare furiously at Ethan. Frozen accounts? Family business? How could his mother transfer 3 million via Alipay? Ethan maddeningly remained perfectly composed. He stood up, gathered the expensive gift bags and walked towards my parents. Dad, he said warmly to my father, presenting the moutai. A little something for you. And Mom, he turned to my mother, holding out the gold bracelet box. This is for you. My mother was still staring blankly at her phone, reeling from the shock of the 3 million yuan transfer. Years of getting up at dawn to sell breakfast crepes from her street cart meant the largest single transaction she usually received was around 28 yuan. 3 million was completely outside her realm of comprehension. Mom, perhaps this gold is a little understated? Ethan frowned slightly at the bracelet box, then opened another larger one. Ah, this is better. A top-quality Hatian jade bangle. It complements your refined aura perfectly, Mom. While my mother was still processing the financial shock, Mrs. Hayes deftly took her hand and began sliding the luminous green jade bangle onto her wrist. Instantly distracted, Mom forgot all about the 3 million, lifting her hand to admire the exquisite jade circling her wrist. Mr. and Mrs. Hayes exchanged a subtle, satisfied smile. So dear, Mrs. Hayes said, turning back to my mother, about the children's wedding, what kind of celebration did you have in mind? Oh. The entire drive back to my apartment, my head felt like it was stuffed with cotton wool. But no matter how dazed I was, one fact remained crystal clear. Ethan's mother had just casually transferred 3 million yuan. The moment the apartment door clicked shut behind us, I rounded on him. All right, Hayes. Confession time. Full disclosure, no more games. Before I could elaborate, he moved swiftly, pinning me gently against the wall by the entryway. He leaned down, his face close, clearly intending to kiss me, attempting to deploy his standard, overwhelm her senses tactic. Not this time. I pushed him away firmly, my expression deadly serious. Confess what? He asked, his breath warm against my earlobe, feigning innocence. The bank accounts. You said they were frozen. I accused. Wife, he sighed, suddenly scooping me up and depositing me onto the small console table beside the door. Have you actually been paying attention to the financial news reports? Your family went bankrupt. I insisted. It had been the biggest local news story for weeks. How could I be mistaken? He himself had admitted to being 3 billion in debt. Chloe, he said, gently tapping the tip of my nose. I went bankrupt. Not my family. My father transferred all his company shares to me the moment I returned from overseas to take over. What difference does that make? I demanded, still confused. The company still went bankrupt, right? Your family's company. He sighed again, a sound laced with weary patience. Legally, Chloe, my parents are separate entities. Just like you. They are not responsible for my personal business debts. Was that really how it worked? I stared into his clear, deep eyes, a familiar sinking feeling washing over me. Had I been played yet again? The wedding date was set quickly. November 3rd. Mrs. Hayes had consulted a fortune teller, apparently, and it was an exceptionally auspicious day, with the date still several months away. It was only early August. Life settled into a strange new routine. Ethan continued his role as house husband, spending hours on his phone managing his complex web of creditors, or so I assumed, while I continued my job and occasionally nagged him about his perceived extravagance and lack of gainful employment. One afternoon, I managed to finish work early and headed home. Opening the apartment door, I stopped short. There was a young man sitting on my sofa. He looked to be in his early 20s, with regular features and a hint of boyish charm. My first thought was, another creditor? Come to collect in person? Before I could decide whether to greet him or run screaming, he looked up and grinned. You must be my uncle's new wife, right? Auntie Chloe. Auntie Chloe? My mind clicked. This must be Leo Hayes, Ethan's nephew, the one he occasionally mentioned. There was definitely a slight family resemblance. I nodded cautiously. Auntie, he leaned forward conspiratorially, could you do me a huge favor? Could you maybe persuade my uncle to pay back the 20,000 he owes me? It's almost Chishi Festival, and I really need it to buy my girlfriend a new handbag. Oh, I was speechless. Had Ethan sunk this low? Refusing to repay a loan to his own nephew? Jeopardizing the poor boy's romantic prospects? I pulled out my phone, checking my WeChat balance. Where is your uncle? He went to the market to buy groceries. Told me to wait here, Leo explained. Okay, add me on WeChat. I'll transfer you the money, I said, feeling a surge of sympathy. Dating was expensive these days. I quickly sent the funds. Leo beamed, thanked me profusely, and practically skipped out the door. Not long after, Ethan returned, grocery bags in hand. He paused when he saw me sitting on the sofa. Where's Leo? My indignation flared. Ethan Hayes, have you no shame? Your own nephew needs money for a Valentine's gift for his girlfriend, and you won't even pay back the 20,000 you owe him? That's just low. Ethan's expression shifted instantly, hardening. Did you give him the money? He asked, his tone sharp, almost severe. His reaction startled me. Yes, I did. I retorted, puffing out my chest slightly, trying to maintain my righteous anger. It's Chishi. The poor kid wants to buy his girlfriend a present. What girlfriend? Ethan deposited the groceries onto the counter with a thud and walked towards me. Chloe, the kid doesn't have a girlfriend. He's what you'd call a simp, hopelessly chasing some girl who barely knows he exists. Oh. Vague memories surfaced of Ethan previously mentioning his nephew's unfortunate romantic entanglements. His parents were worried he'd get scammed by women, Ethan explained, rubbing his temples wearily, looking utterly exasperated with me. So they arranged for his living allowance to be deposited into an account I manage for him. I immediately grabbed my phone and tried to message Leo, demanding the money back. Message failed. You are not friends with this user. That little brat. He'd taken the money and immediately blocked me. After calling me Annie so sweetly. How could he be so cold-blooded? I showed the error message to Ethan, my face crestfallen. His expression turned grim. Don't worry, he said, his voice dangerously quiet. He will pay the price for this. Unfortunately, as it turned out later that night, the person who ended up paying the price was me. With the wedding date fixed, Jess and I scheduled an appointment at a trendy salon for pre-wedding hair treatments. Now that Jess knew only Ethan himself was technically bankrupt, she'd stopped urging me to divorce him. See, she declared, leaning back in her salon chair as the stylist applied pungent chemicals to her hair. I told you rich people are crafty. They obviously transferred all the assets to protect themselves and left the son holding the bag of debt. She sounded both pleased for me and vaguely outraged at the perceived injustice of capitalism. It might not be exactly like that, I mumbled defensively. When Ethan returned from overseas to take over, nobody expected the company to collapse. His parents probably hadn't anticipated their highly educated son running the family empire into the ground either. Honestly, I hadn't expected him to be quite so financially destructive. Jess shot me an exasperated look. Don't be naive, Chloe, especially not after you're married. You need to start working on him. Pillow talk. Find out exactly how much money his parents still have. See if they can't bail their son out. I know, I sighed. I had considered it. Since Ethan had bankrupted the family business, his parents arguably bore some responsibility. Maybe they shouldn't have retired quite so early and become absentee owners. More oversight might have prevented the disaster. Thinking about it shattered the last vestiges of my childhood idolization of Ethan. My teenage crush, the heroic fantasies, the silly romantic dreams. All gone. My hero was undeniably brilliant, but also undeniably human, and apparently capable of losing a fortune. If I had actually broken up with him when he first told me about the bankruptcy, maybe he would have jumped off a bridge. Looked at that way, I suppose I'd saved a life. After the salon, Jess dragged me shopping and then to a movie. I texted Ethan to let him know I wouldn't be home for dinner. Okay, was his terse reply. By the time we emerged from the dark cinema, night had fallen. As we stood on the sidewalk debating whether to get a taxi or rideshare, I saw a familiar figure heading towards the theater entrance. Simon Stone, the glasses-wearing assistant/creditor. I instinctively ducked behind Jess. What's wrong? Jess asked, grabbing my arm. I discreetly pointed towards Simon, Ethan's creditor. Jess peered in the direction I indicated, then rubbed her eyes. Him? Chloe. Isn't that Ethan's assistant? Assistant? Impossible. I clearly heard Simon himself say Ethan owed him $20 million. No, really, he's the assistant, Jess insisted confidently. She pulled out her phone, typed something quickly and showed me the screen. See? Simon Stone. Ethan Hayes' best friend. From Stanford. Came back from the US with him. Became executive assistant to the chairman of Hayes Corporation. The online business profile even had his picture. It was undeniably him. Just then, Simon spotted me and waved cheerfully. Sister-in-law. Enjoying a movie with your friend. Has my husband paid back the $20 million he owes you yet? I asked, my voice dripping with ice. Not yet, Simon replied, pausing for only half a second before continuing smoothly. Maybe you could put in a word for me, sister-in-law? The boss can be terrible about paying debts on time. I snatched Jess's phone and shoved the screen towards him. Aren't you his assistant? The $20 million is for back wages he owes me, Simon retorted, completely unfazed, looking utterly nonchalant. Do me a favor and pass along a message for me, will you? Tell the boss if I don't get paid soon, I'm filing a complaint with the labor board. With that, he casually slung an arm around the young woman beside him and strolled into the cinema. I stood frozen on the sidewalk, a burning rage tightening my chest. It actually hurt to breathe. Chloe, calm down, Jess soothed, looking alarmed by my reaction. Maybe he really does owe him wages? Just then my phone rang. My hands trembled as I answered. Ethan's voice came through the line, sounding unusually tense. Stay right where you are, Chloe. Don't move. I'm coming to get you. Before I could even reply, he hung up. I told Jess to go ahead, that I'd wait for Ethan. It took him nearly half an hour to arrive, tumbling out of a taxi looking surprisingly disheveled. He was still wearing the bright yellow ducky slippers I bought him as a joke, paired with a plain white t-shirt and gray shorts. It was a look that screamed less casual and more frantically thrown together. He walked up to me, hesitantly reaching for my hand. "Are you really angry?" I snatched my hand away. "I really do owe all that money, Chloe," he insisted, a last-ditch attempt at maintaining the charade. I lifted my chin, meeting his gaze, my eyes stinging with unshed tears. "Was it funny, Ethan? Watching me panic every day, worrying myself sick over $3 billion of imaginary debt? Did you find it amusing?" "No," he corrected softly, his expression softening. "I found it adorable." That was the final straw. The tears spilled over, hot and angry, tracking down my cheeks. This man, did he even have a heart? Seeing me cry, Ethan finally seemed to panic. He fumbled, trying to wipe away my tears, but I flinched away from his touch. He stood there helplessly, looking utterly lost. I scrubbed at my eyes fiercely, taking a ragged breath to calm myself. "All right," I said, my voice thick but steady. "Tell me the truth. What is the real story behind the $3 billion? The old company filed for bankruptcy, yes?" he explained, his expression finally turning sincere. "But I've been setting up a new company. The money, I borrowed it from friends to fund the new venture." "Not from suppliers?" I challenged, remembering his initial story. "The supplier debts were mostly covered by the auction of some of my non-essential real estate assets," he clarified. "So the $3 billion, that was all borrowed from friends?" I stared at him, incredulous. What kind of company required that much startup capital? Was he planning to build rockets? "Yes," he confirmed after a moment's thought. "I can show you the loan agreements later if you want." "How did you borrow it?" "In cash," I pressed. "Weren't your bank accounts frozen?" "I had them transfer the funds," he admitted quietly, finally meeting my gaze. "To your account." "Oh." Ethan took me to an ATM the next morning. He inserted a bank card, my bank card, the one I rarely used, into the machine. He entered the PIN, navigated to the balance inquiry screen, and then stepped aside. I leaned forward, peered at the glowing numbers on the screen, and nearly fainted. The balance displayed was astronomical, mind-boggling, terrifying. "When did this happen?" I whispered, feeling dizzy. My own bank account suddenly held an unimaginable fortune. Are they going to think I'm laundering money? Will I be arrested? "Do you remember our first date?" Ethan asked gently. "You gave me this card." Of course I remembered. I'd had a little too much wine, gotten sick in his ridiculously expensive car, and felt mortified. Too embarrassed to hand him cash directly for the cleaning, I'd opened a new bank account, deposited $1,000 into it, and given him the card. He hadn't said anything at the time, just accepted the card and taken me out for an extravagant dinner. I never imagined he'd actually use it, let alone use it to channel billions in loans. "The old company was in the process of declaring bankruptcy then," Ethan explained, a flicker of genuine remorse finally entering his eyes. "All my personal assets were tied up or under scrutiny. So for the new venture, I used your name, your account, to handle the initial setup." "What if," I asked, lifting my head to meet his gaze directly, my voice trembling slightly, "what if I hadn't agreed to marry you that day?" He hesitated for a fraction of a second, then shook his head slowly. "Honestly, Chloe, that possibility never even crossed my mind." He was that sure of me? The audacity, the sheer, unadulterated confidence of the man, was breathtaking. That night, for the first time since our wedding, I didn't share the bedroom with Ethan. I gathered a pillow and a blanket and resolutely made myself a bed on the living room sofa. Ethan, the infuriating man, didn't even try to stop me. He just let me retreat, leaving me to spend a miserable night tossing and turning on the lumpy cushions. My back protested vehemently by morning. It was Saturday and my mother called, nagging about scheduling wedding photos. The wedding was only 2 months away, she reminded me sharply, and these things took time. Thinking about the elaborate lies and manipulations Ethan had subjected me to, my enthusiasm for a big wedding evaporated completely. Yet, the thought of actually breaking up with him, divorcing him over this, felt wrong somehow. Too final. And maybe deep down a part of me didn't want to. Ethan had made breakfast and called me to the table. I listlessly poked at the food with my fork. Suddenly, the dam of hurt and resentment I'd been holding back all night broke. Tears started streaming down my face, silent at first, then turning into choked sobs. Ethan just sat there watching me quietly, making no attempt to comfort me this time. After a few minutes of crying into my scrambled eggs, I fled back to the bedroom, collapsing onto the bed to cry properly. A little while later he followed me in. He walked over to the wardrobe, opened it, and reached into the pocket of the suit jacket I'd bought him at the budget market. He pulled out a thick wad of cash $100 bills. "Stop crying," he said, his voice flat. He held the money out to me. "Here. Take it all." Seeing the cash, the hard-earned pay I'd given him, which he clearly hadn't spent a dime of, only made me cry harder. All this time worrying about his finances, trying to be supportive. The fool, the absolute clown, had been me. "Then what do you want, Chloe?" Ethan asked, his voice finally laced with weariness. "I want the truth," I sobbed, glaring up at him through my tears. "I told you everything yesterday," he replied, sounding genuinely aggrieved. "Did you plan this all along?" I demanded, suspicion rearing its head again. "Were you just trying to trick me into marrying you?" "Actually," Ethan said, his expression suddenly shifting, becoming serious, almost stern. "I was about to ask you the same thing. Were you trying to trick me? Right from the start?" "I know. Of course not," I stammered, caught completely off guard. "No," he challenged, ticking points off on his fingers, acting like the picture of innocence, refusing to let me touch you, barely letting me kiss you without a fight, ignoring my calls 9 times out of 10, replying to my messages with nothing but emojis if you replied at all, and then sneaking off behind my back to go on a blind date with another man? If that's not playing games, Chloe, what is? That wasn't playing games. That was caution. Self-preservation. Maybe a little bit of intentional romantic tension? "If I hadn't gone bankrupt," he pressed, his gaze pinning me. "You were planning to break up with me, weren't you?" My face went pale. How could he possibly know that? Was he psychic? "You spent weeks reeling me in like a fish," Ethan continued, his voice low and dangerously soft. "And the moment I was hooked, you were ready to cut the line and find a new pond. Chloe Song," he concluded, leaning closer, a dark glint in his eyes. "You have the potential to be a real heartbreaker, you know that?" Damn it. The tears threatened to start again, but this time they were tears of shame. "Well," he sighed, the tension suddenly breaking. "They say every pot finds its lid. No point in being modest now." He gently brushed the hair back from my face, then leaned down and softly kissed my tear-reddened eyelids. "We're a perfect match, Chloe. Utter chaos together. Better stick with me. Don't inflict yourself on anyone else." I recounted Ethan's accusations to Jess later that day. Jess looked thoughtful for a moment. "You know," she said slowly, "I think he might have a point. Get lost." I snapped, though secretly I wondered if she was right. For the next few nights, I stubbornly continued to sleep on the sofa. Ethan had the entire comfortable queen-sized bed in the bedroom to himself. Every morning I woke up stiff and sore, while he emerged from the bedroom looking refreshed and infuriatingly cheerful, already making breakfast in the kitchen. "You could at least offer to switch," I grumbled one morning, rubbing my aching lower back as I shuffled into the kitchen. It was his fault I was out here after all. He should be the one suffering on the sofa. "Want me to share?" Ethan offered, handing me a perfectly peeled hard-boiled egg. His dark eyes seemed full of gentle amusement. "I can make room for you." I took the egg, biting into it distractedly. "It's my bed in the first place," I mumbled indistinctly around a mouthful of yolk. "Why should you have to make room?" He didn't reply, just watched me with that quiet, infuriatingly charming smile that always made my traitorous heart flutter. The wedding day arrived in a blur of preparations and escalating panic. The venue was grand, filled with elegantly dressed people, many of whom I recognized only from financial news programs or society magazines. Leo Hayes, decked out as the best man, found me during a lull in the proceedings. "Auntie Chloe," he stage whispered conspiratorially, "you have to throw the bouquet my way later, okay? Do you actually have a girlfriend now?" I asked coolly. Ever since he'd blocked me on WeChat after scamming me out of 20,000, my goodwill towards him had evaporated. "Almost," he replied confidently. I rolled my eyes, uninterested in his misplaced optimism. Just as I was about to dismiss him, Ethan appeared, striding through the crowd towards me, looking devastatingly handsome in a perfectly tailored black tuxedo. By now the debt was officially cleared, or rather, revealed as investment capital. The new company was up and running smoothly. His bank accounts were unfrozen. Using his own legitimate funds, he had purchased another ring for me. This one costing a staggering $880,000. During the ceremony's ring exchange, he'd replaced the cheap one with this new, blindingly sparkly diamond. When it was my turn to place the ring on his finger, I noticed it seemed a little snug. He must have put on some weight during his house husband phase. It took a bit of wiggling to get it past his knuckle. Oh, he murmured, leaning close as I finally succeeded. Looks like you've got me trapped for good now. Later, during the ceremonial kiss, he held me tight, whispering against my ear, I'm all yours now. I wrapped my arms around his neck, tilting my chin up defiantly. Damn right you are, I whispered back fiercely. From now on, you listen to me. Whatever the wife says, he agreed, his lips meeting mine. During the bouquet toss, despite his earlier plea, Leo Hayes did not emerge victorious. The flowers were caught by a young woman barely 18 or 19 who looked slightly bewildered but then broke into a radiant smile, excitedly showing the bouquet to the equally young man beside her. Watching the girl's unadulterated joy, a sudden wave of memory washed over me, pulling me back 8 years. I remembered getting my acceptance letter to my dream university, bursting with excitement, wanting to share the news with the most important person in my world, Ethan. I'd found him standing under a streetlight, one hand casually tucked in his pocket, kissing another woman. I'd frozen, staring. He'd noticed me, paused his kiss, and offered a lazy, infuriatingly cool smirk. Shouldn't you be home, kid? This isn't for little girls, he drawled. I'm 19. I'd yelled back, furious and heartbroken. He detached himself from the woman, sauntered over to me, tilted my chin up with one finger, his smile dangerously flirtatious. Oh, is that an invitation, little girl? I'd shoved his hand away and fled, running until my lungs burned. For years afterward, I'd replayed that moment, plagued by regret. What if I hadn't run? Would things have been different? Would I have become his girlfriend then? Probably not. A wealthy playboy like him? He wouldn't have valued something or someone that came too easily. He must have seen my crush, my blatant admiration even back then. That's why he'd felt so free to tease and dismiss me. He knew I was already his for the taking. Well, I told myself sternly back then, next time I won't run. What are you thinking about? Ethan's voice pulled me back to the present. He'd slipped his arm around my waist, his touch warm and grounding. I gestured subtly towards the young couple who'd caught the bouquet. Just watching them, I replied. Ethan followed my gaze, a thoughtful, knowing expression on his face. She reminds me a bit of you. How so? I bristled slightly. I was always very reserved. A low chuckle rumbled in his chest, his voice dropping to that familiar, teasing tone. Both very good at flirting, he murmured, his eyes sparkling with mischief. That's not true, I protested indignantly. You were the one who always started it. He silenced the rest of my protest with another kiss, long and thorough. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw the young couple watching us, their expressions a mixture of awe and envy. Fine, I thought, melting into his embrace. I'll let him win this round. But the rest of our lives stretched ahead, long and full of possibilities. He would learn eventually the true cost of provoking his wife. The end.